Welcome to Tuesday night at the workshop. I've got Theo's kit made 335. Now off camera I've been doing some spraying, so I've had to kind of do a bit off camera, a bit on camera. So it's not the fullest of jobs being shown. Sorry Theo if you hope to see the pickup replacement, but I was doing that while I was spraying, and I have to have a mask on, which means I can't can't talk at the camera. So I've done the pickup swap over, tested them, they all work. Now I'm into getting I've changed the nut and just sized it, so we've got it ready to go. I'm just going to tune up these strings. Obviously undoing one of them, not obviously, but typically undoing one of them caused one to break. Now this is one of the downsides. This is one of the downsides of working with locking tuners, and I'll kind of cover that at the end when I restring it. So having changed the pickups, we've got, let's show you what we've got here. We've got a nicely made customized kit. It's finished in some sort of poly finish by the looks of it. I could be wrong. I've marked up the frets already for fret leveling. I'm going to check the height of the action in a minute. We're down one string, but I'll over tighten the others to simulate the stringing pressure. So we've got two F holes over there, and we've got a bolt-on neck here with a scarf joint at the end there, Geiger locking tuners, and a very pronounced additional piece there to the heel. Not the end of the world. It's structurally perfectly fine. It's just that it shows up in a natural finish. So the aim of this is we're going to get this now with these jazz Seymour Duncans jazz pickups. We're going to have a great tone now. And next thing, we're just going to make sure this action is hunky-dory. The actual drop is a very nearly a drop-in nut replacement here. It looks incredibly low, which is fine by me. I'm just going to now measure the action at this end and adjust it if necessary. So we're aiming for 1.5 on the bass side, across to 1.25 on the treble side, which I'm obviously not quite at because I'm slightly missing my last string, but that's very nearly there. In fact, that will do. So what I'll do is just again tune this back up a bit over. All a bit sharp, which is cool. So now it means I can get straight on with the precision fret leveling with full zoom. No, we're now full zoom. So here we go. It's having an interesting, saw an interesting discussion on Facebook earlier on. It's always a danger. And let me just check. I did check this before, I'll double check it. Here we got just enough relief. Slightly more than none is my watchword. Yes, there was somebody had drawn a picture or shown a picture of a Strat, the end of a Strat headstock behind the nut, where and the nut was in place, but evidently somebody had filed down the slots to get a really low action. Where did you go? Got a really low action, and of course these aren't staying on because of the missing string. Yeah, so it got a really low action, and but in doing so it had cut into the wood, the rosewood behind the nut, which is sometimes what happens And it was one of those posts that was quite annoying because, you know, everybody took a look at it and then dived in with their verdicts. So everybody thought because it looked odd or, you know, had some cutaway, a little notches cut into the wood, they declared it a disaster, and the person who did it was a joke, a fraud, and you should never take your guitars to them ever again, and so on and so forth. So it was a whole kind of load of grandstanding of indignant people who all knew better, which pressed the button for me because I've regularly seen situations where the nut, the space, the wood behind the nut gets very slightly cut, or, you know, cut with the files, because it's inherent in the geometry of that Strat stroke Tele design. Now, it's kind of boring stuff. I'm not going to stop and draw diagrams of it, but it was an interesting example that if your kind of primary focus, or if a strong focus is how something looks, what I guess, put it another way, what I realised after a long time of doing guitar setups was that nuts were often, I saw a lot of people spending time making nuts apparently look tidy, but you know, all of them were either too high an action over the first fret, meaning everything went sharp from that point onwards, or yeah, well, mostly they were too high, or you know, so they played sharp when you pressed the note down near the nut, you know, and or they were just they had slots that were, you know, badly cut and gripping the string and so on and so on. So there was tons of problems, and I, even with the ones that looked really fantastic, so I sort of, the more I worked on guitar nuts, particularly Strat type, Tele and Strat types, the more I realised that, you know, first of all, everything above the string, you know, halfway up the slot, if you like, is meaningless material, so you can take it away, which I always did. And once you took it away, you know, your strings were still perfectly sat in the little cups and they weren't moving anywhere, but you just didn't have any excess material above that point. Once you'd done that, what you realised was how little of the actual nut on any Strat you actually needed. There was practically nothing left. So meaning the strings emerged, as this one does, barely above the wood. If I give you an example of this on this guitar, because it's got a good example. Let's zoom in as much as I can, sort of. Yeah, stay there. So I don't know if you can see, but there's very little space where that, I mean, it looks bigger maybe because there's not a lot of space under there. So when it's cut to the right level, this is quite close to the ground. If you take off any excess over there, there's still quite a bit of excess. You see all of that there, upwards from there. That's all unnecessary. So once you've taken all that off, suddenly you've got an incredibly small, little thin, flat looking nut doing its job perfectly. And so on the Strat style guitars, that means your strings exit the back quite low, and as a consequence, the strings would be likely to touch the rosewood that sticks out behind the nut. But more importantly, as this photograph in this forum showed, it's very often when you cut the slots to the right to give the right first fret action, and you cut downwards and backwards, which you need to do, because the two things, if you make these two things a priority, the low first fret action and the and the sloping backwards nut, slot, sorry, you know, if those two are important for you to make it play properly, then you basically don't have a choice. You have to cut it. You have to angle the fret slot, sorry, the nut slot files. You have to angle them backwards in order to get this downwards and backwards angle. And in order to get that, then sometimes what happens is you find that angle, if we look at it here, imagine and this is not a good example, but if I'm in a Strat, I can't cut straight, I need to angle backwards, and suddenly there's a bit of wood sticking out the back there, and it's incredibly easy that your file touches the wood, which it has done in the example given in that forum. But it just struck me how many people went into massive criticism mode with what I could suspect was only a sort of visual understanding. You know, so they looked at how it looked and decided from that it was wrong and that it was done by an idiot and a numpty and whatever. And actually, many times I've been faced with the decision, by the way, because if that wood behind the nut goes on, every millimetre it goes on, and some guitars have more or less than others, or you know, there's a variety of different lengths, but every time it goes on, the further it goes by millimetre, the actually more likely you are to be cutting into it when you are cutting your your nut slots at any angle other than dead flat. So like I said, if the priority is you have to have the right first fret action, that dictates how far down you cut, and if the other priority is that you have a backwards slot, if you can't compromise on either of those, then chances are your files may well hit the rosewood that extends out the back. Now, if you do that, because you're not going to compromise on the playability, and certainly I wouldn't, and that's why the point I made in the post, if you're not going to compromise that, then you're left with a choice. You could cut down the rosewood at the back, which would first of all get rid of the grooves you made, but it also there's so little depth to a good Strat or Tele slot, nut slot, that actually you'd probably very quickly end up with it being a shelf like on this kind of guitar. So you don't really have a lot to cut down in order to reshape it. Ignore the tuning. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that so far. Can't hear any problems. The frets are a little bit sharp here, so I'm going to take care of those as well while we're at it. My fret diggling files. I'm going to take off these strings now and throw them away because they've done their service, but I will discuss why I don't like locking tuners, or if you do use them, how I recommend using them to stop strings breaking. The problem with this is, you didn't see, but as soon as I tell you what I've just done. Hold on a minute. I'm just going to slack these off. Yeah, as soon as I slacked off the high E string, it just snapped, and that's what you commonly get with. That's liable to happen with these locking tuners. So it's not a great thing. So I would recommend we take some remedial action, but I'll show you what I mean in a bit. First thing I'm going to do is put some glue on here and fix this nut in place. Now it's very, very low frets. Sorry, the strings over the first fret. It's a very, very low action. It's very marginal, isn't the word? It's at the limit. So it's nice and smooth, snug either end. I've got it on my fingers, which is where I want it to be. So I'm just going to flick this over, put it under a little bit of pressure, and I'm going to drag this one over. do the same. And that's not sitting where I want it, but that'll do. Okay, we'll just leave that for a minute to set. I sized that perfectly beforehand, so there's no kind of hangover. It's just a nice fit on either side. Let's put away the fret leveling bits, and we'll be on into doing the fret ends and then recrowning, which we will use this in between sanding as well, spraying as well. So I'm not sure, I might get one more coat on before I leave tonight. So I'm going to slack these off now. So having leveled the frets, and I've done it with the strings on and the neck under load, that gives us a more accurate leveling than if we just did it with the strings off and the neck flattened, which is the conventional way to do it. But this other way is more accurate, which is great. So let's take these off and bin them, since they're -1 anyway. Yeah, so we've leveled the frets, and that means I've leveled it so you can play it at a lower action, and that's the idea. You can always play any guitar at a higher action, because at a certain point the action is above the level where the underlying uneven frets make an impact. So as long as you go a bit higher, you don't have to worry about even frets really, unless they're really terrible, and you know when you've got one that's really terrible. So this wasn't in that sort of situation. So if you want to play with a very low action on an electric guitar, it means that you have to be prepared to level the frets in order to do that. So having leveled them, it means I've put a slightly flat spot along the top, and now I'm going to mark these frets up again. You'll see that some of them have more flat, well, you won't, because by the time I've polished them out they'll all be good and done, but when you're doing this, you can see that some are cut more than others, so some stick up a little higher than others, and so require a bit more leveling. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to crown these, or re-crown them. So having put a slightly flat spot on them to get the target levelness, relative levelness between them, I'm now just using this concave file to round off any sharp edges of the flat spot. So it just returns it to more of an arch shaped fret. Now this one's had a fair bit of flattening on the bass side, so just have to do that a bit. Don't worry about the bridge rattling. Have to do a little bit more leveling. And this one's taken a bit more as well, a bit more on the treble side to level. So and what I'll do after this, I'll just go over, make sure that any sharp edges or burrs are taken away with the file. So I had another viewer stomp off after me just muttering unusual observations about what's going on in the world, and it marvels, and I marvel each time at how flimsy people have become, that if they find somebody whose opinions they disagree with, they feel they have to go, first of all make a comment about it, an angry comment, and then sort of flounce out and let you know they're never coming back because you've committed a sin of talking about politics or something. But what it really means is you disagree with my, usually it's, you love Trump, you don't like Trump and I love him, and therefore I can't bear to listen to you. I'm going to be angry and storm out, and slam the door on my way out. And honestly, I don't know if that's become normal for you young uns, but for us older people, the people that sometimes get contemptuously called boomers, whatever that crime of having been born at a certain time in history, whatever that crime is that you didn't know you were committing. But anyway, us boomers, so-called boomers, we remember a time where you discussed anything, you know, everybody had various different opinions. What you're telling me, you're not full. I've emptied you already. Oh my God. Holy. Okay, well, I'll start again on this one. Hold on. All right, starting again on the upper camera, the Sony camera. Well, sorry about that. This is this iPhone is turning out to be a bit unworkable when it comes to recording these things. I'm going to have to get something that has more memory on it. Anyway, I empty all the videos off before I come and do this. But the phone has, the iPhone. Anyone who knows iPhones will know they have mysterious 80 gigabytes tied up in system files or unknown OS files that they can't do anything with, or hidden files, or just operating junk, and it can't manage itself like a normal human being would manage space. Anyway, yeah, I was saying just a minute ago that, you know, we older people genuinely, we didn't fall into groups that couldn't deal with each other. I mean, you know, there were some divisions, you know, like there were punks and non-punks. So if you're a punk, you hung out with the punks, and that's kind of was your identity at school. You were a punk, and then there was everybody else who were, I don't know, people who like Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath and, you know, greasy rocker types. I don't know what they were called, but anyway. So, but it wasn't an issue of you didn't get angry because somebody was a punk and you didn't understand them, or that you didn't get angry that they didn't like your music. You just saw them as different from you, and you know, you might think their music was horrible and you couldn't understand why they liked it. But now it's this intolerance thing. It's just it's mental. It really is. And you know, I don't think people understand what this means for innovation and learning. This sort of triggered oppositional binary temper tantrum business is the death of creativity, scientific innovation. You know, it really is. You can't, if people can't challenge, you know, held or certain held ideas, or you know, you dare not fall into a particular camp way of thinking, you know, camp thought, because you'll get too much abuse and it'll be unbearable, or heaven forbids, you know, you'll get shot for having a view. You know, the learning and scholarly inquiry and all that good stuff that, well, sort of made us what we are, it's going to be done away with. You know, the fact that people don't think that there'll be a long-term consequence in people getting shot for having views, you know, I didn't like the guy, talking Charlie Kirk. I didn't have any particular fondness for him. You know, I think he represents. He had some quite uncaring opinions about things. You know, anyone who is so hurt by the far left's use of the word empathy, that he bans it and says it doesn't exist in his vocabulary, is sorely triggered. you know, I'm very not woke, but I totally think there is a valid concept of empathy, and you know, I consider myself to be empathetic or empathic, whatever the correct way of saying it is. Actually, I'm worried by those who say, expressly say they aren't. I think that's worrying. But I'm going to roll up a bit of this and just sand off the end of these frets a little bit, because I think they were a bit sharp. I'm just going to run a little bit down the edge here just to take the burrs off, and then over the top edge to round off soften off any edge there. That's good. So we'll turn it around and do the same. Oh, there you are. Yeah, I mean, have somebody recoil at a word like empathy. I find that quite an alarm bell, you know, because what does empathy mean? Truthfully, empathy means the ability to put yourself, in essence, in somebody else's point of view. In other words, to be able to imagine someone else's discomfort or upset or pain or experience, you know, anybody who isn't you, to be able to experience or understand their point of view. So to claim that you can't do that and wouldn't want to do that is a kind of, for me, is a very worrying thing. Why wouldn't you? You know, I think for me, empathy is the reason we're in such trouble at the moment, is exactly because a great part of our populations in the progressive modern world has lost the ability to be empathetic, or the desire to have empathy for others. You know, you could look at a leader of an expansionist invading country and say that person clearly has no ability to empathise with the people whose country he's destroying day by day, and then people the parents whose children he's murdering in their beds with drones and whatever, sent in the middle of the night. So empathy would make that far less possible. And the fact that somebody could shoot somebody even somebody they disliked at a school event, a university event, that demonstrates absolute lack of empathy. So, you know, the person that killed him was actually more like him, or was demonstrating the qualities that he espoused in some ways, which is just tragically ironic. It's not even funny, but it's just horribly ironic. No, don't get empathy. Well, nor did this person who could shoot another human being as if it was nothing. There was, funny enough, there was on one. Not many things shock me. I mean, I've seen plenty of death and destruction these last 2 or 3 years. But I was in that. There were lots of discussions in response to the Charlie Kirk killing, and an American person was telling a story of I don't know what context exactly, but they talked about, they were talking about just about how they'd they killed shot their first deer, and the way they wrote it, he was telling of how he'd shot his first deer, shot it in the face when he was 13, right? Now, I know some people get on the high horse and go, ah, see, we're hunting. At least we're good men and we hunt and we bring food, and you anti-hunting pussies and all the rest of the insults that would fly. But none of it takes away from the fact that I was hearing a person talking about it being normal that he shot a deer, a living, sentient, beautiful, intelligent. Right, maybe you have to eat it once in a while, but you shot it in the face with a rifle, and somehow felt good about it, or it didn't trouble him in any way. And I thought anyone who can do that and kind of walk away without having to spend the rest of his life wondering about where that, not the impulse to kill and eat, but the impulse to enjoy the process, that you'd want to go and do it again and take your mates out with you when you went and did it. If you can do that without having any feeling, I think you've already lost empathy. People say, well, you can't be empathic towards animals. See, I disagree. I treat animals well because I imagine not being there, but I imagine them having feelings or experiencing discomfort and fear or whatever, and so I do my best not to hurt them or frighten them if I can, and certainly that includes not killing them unless I absolutely had to. And I think that's I get worried around people who don't have any feeling for the experience of others. That frightens me, and certainly even don't have some sensitivity for the feelings or the experience of the suffering of animals, because people arguing that in a modern America or something they actually had to go hunting and couldn't find anything to eat in a supermarket somewhere easier. I think that's not true. I think there's an experience of it that people want to do, and I get it. That's you. There's nothing I can do about it. But I think it all ties in with this issue of empathy, lacking in. Anyway, I thought hilarious that, or funny, sad, funny, ha-ha, sob, that people are so uncomfortable disagreeing with somebody that they have to take off in a hurry and say something angry as they do it, insulting as they do it. Amazing. I tried to, even though I didn't warm to Charlie Kirk. I had watched him a fair bit because I was kind of curious about his questioning style. I've seen quite a few people do that sort of thing, and I know that in various ways. I think Ben Shapiro has done some similar kind of, Ben Shapiro destroys student who does this, and that whole thing about you debate with someone to destroy them is actually far more dangerous, it's a revealing and dangerous sign than I think people give it credit for. And I know people will excuse it or write it off as, it's just about how the social media algorithms work. It's nothing. It's digital banter. Well, it's not. It ties into the fact that people can't see any benefit. There isn't any payoff for an interesting discussion that you use your brain to evaluate. It has to end up with someone being destroyed and begging for mercy, or leaving in tears, or getting shot in the neck or something. It's got to be extreme in every case. And I just think we've got to stop doing that. We have to stop doing that. But until people stand up and realise that it's a problem, then I'm afraid I don't think it will. Can't see it changing because it's people are already too addicted to the negative stuff. Real pity. Anyway, as an older boomer type old fogey, I am amazed that people are so peeved at someone's viewpoint that they have to leave the room. I've got to go, I can't stand it. You have to think, I always think, and I know they wouldn't agree with me, but I think the obvious thought, which is, are you really that insecure about what you think that you can't be in the same room as somebody who doesn't agree with you? It's very weird. Now, I'm sort of wondering whether I should spray some. Should I spray some? Should I spray some more paint? But then I'd have to be in a mask. Actually, I will. What I'll do is I'll spray the paint and I'll wear the mask while I do this sanding out. Then you won't have to watch me. Well, actually, I can leave it running. You just have to bear with me. There'll just be one level of sanding. It won't take you. I'll probably edit it out or something. But anyway, right. Let's see what we've got. Ow. Maybe. Right. Nine to 42. Doop, doop. Time here, boop booping. Oh, nearly 9 o'clock. So eventually I'll take this off when it's cleared out a bit. Stupid phone. Stupid phone. Stupid memory. nearly done on this pile, and then those to do. Just going to dust this off, remove this, wash my hands, and then reconvene to fit new strings, complete the setup. I'm reading Navalny's autobiography, Patriot, and nearing the end, and he's in prison still, just been not long done a hunger strike, But the interesting thing about that is that the hospital, it was put in the hospital, so-called medical facility, which is anything but, was anything but. People had no idea what they were doing. Couldn't make anything better if they tried. But it was interesting for me because earlier this year I'd been reading out loud to Claire Solzhenitsyn's Cancer Ward. Sounds like a jolly book to read, but it's a fabulous book, and it concerns itself with the 1960s Russian cancer clinic. And what's incredible is that Navalny's story of being in the medical hospital ward, or whatever it was called, is absolutely no different at all. I'm sure he himself must have read Solzhenitsyn's Cancer Ward, but it makes you think that, 70 years or whatever more, 60, 70 years later, nothing's changed in that part of the world. It's still treating people the same in prisons, because the characters in the cancer ward come from the penal system in Russia, so they're only there because they're sent there from whatever prison they're being held in, and they end up on the wards, cancer wards. But yeah, it's astonishing how little and nothing effectively has changed in all that time. Madness. In fact, the doctors, nurses in the Solzhenitsyn's version were better and kinder, obviously. Well, no, obviously they were better and kinder, even though they were tending to prisoners, and more caring than the ones running Navalny's prison, or the ones working in Navalny's prison. It's just astonishing how something less they are. Right, I'm just going to wash my hands. Before I handle the strings. So I think we need a bit of oil, lemon oil, for the fingerboard. There you are, still. So give that a quick going over. Yeah, I suppose knowing how, spoiler alert, knowing how the Navalny story ends up, it's tragic, because he was a courageous man standing up to that regime. When you read the damage they did to him in poisoning him with Novichok, and I'm sorry, but when I hear useful idiots out here in the democratic West apologising or making excuses and saying that didn't happen, and the guy that they worship wouldn't do such a thing. No, 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 and thrice no. That was 4 times no, but no, no, and 4 times no. I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. Not sorry. I ain't buying it. Ain't buying it, no I ain't at all. Right then, strings. So here we go with the strings. Well, I can't zoom in now because I don't have the memory on my phone. So what we do is we pull the string through, pull the things through, and we line it up with the hole, slack off the locking part underneath, all the way through, pull it taut, right, and then pull it back about 1 centimetre before locking it off, and then lock it off. That centimetre will then be used to wrap a little bit round the post. Now the reason I'm doing that is crimping the string automatically damages it, always damages it to some degree. Putting that extra bit of string around the post means if you have to slack the string off and remove it, which you quite often find yourself having to do, if you don't have that extra bit of string, you've only got the same spot when you put the string back through, like I did with the set that I used for the leveling. When you put it back through, you've got no slack. You have to re-bite the spot that was bitten by the tuner in the first place. With a bit of extra factored in, you can push the string through a bit further. Or sorry, what can you do? You can use you crimp it further down that way, and it means that if you come to redo it, you can push the crimped part through this time if you have to, and then it'll be outside on the far side of the tuner, and you'll get 2 goes at it. And once you've broken a couple just by slacking them off, if you have in the past, then you'll be pleased to do it this way, because even though you put on a little bit extra, and you might say, well, what's the point of that, since I bought the tuner so I didn't have to take any time, I want it to be instant. Well, that's fine, but for the luxury of having it working instantly is you will always end up breaking, quite often end up breaking strings, especially the thinner ones, the plain ones, as soon as you either slack off the tuner or as soon as you try and put it through and reclamp it. So giving yourself that little bit of extra possibilities, I think, is a good move, and it's only 1 centimetre of extra string, and it allows that coil of string, by the way, to take up the load instead of having to tighten the clamp bit down. So I sort of slack off on the clamping a little bit and allow the wrap around the tuner, the one wrap around the tuner, to take up the load. And yes, it still puts a fair old minimum amount of material onto the post, which is good. So what we'll do is we'll get the strings on, we'll bed them in, stretch them out, and then we'll check the intonation and make sure everything's good. Pull back 1 centimetre, lock it off. Not very good grip at the moment because I've got problems with my fingers. Probably be quicker if I just had an electric screwdriver stringer turner thing. Right, nearly there. The changing of the pickups wasn't too difficult. It's not the tidiest thing, but it wasn't the tidiest thing under there to begin with. So the original ones were put together with some snap together things, so obviously I couldn't reuse those exactly. I just cut off the original ones where they joined the snap things, and I just soldered it and shrink tubed it. So, and I tied off the coil split pair out of the way. The coil split pair is gives you the opportunity to do more complex wiring, as you know, Theo, because your new pickups were 4 core plus a bare, so there's plenty of opportunity to do coil splits and phase shifts, phase switching, or even series parallel. But to be fair, doing that in semi-acoustic is a nightmare task. It's so fiddly and so easy to break any of the tiny soldering connections on the lugs, especially if you're doing things that require extra wires, more than one wire going to each lug. It's a nightmare, and series parallel always involves that. Although I think it's quite a reasonably useful modification, it's just a pain. Right, so just to kind of gently bed these in, take off the last bit of masking tape. So what we'll do is we'll get the stretching going. Theo, for your info, tuning stability has nothing to do with the tuners, oddly enough, but it has everything to do with two things. First, getting your nut right, so you need the right material, the slots cut right, and the right first fret action, i.e. very low. I tend to aim for 0.3 of a millimetre, but it can be as low as 0.15 or something, really low. It's incredibly surprising how low you can go, but it needs to be low. It's got to be well below half a mil. So half of your tuning stability is down to your nut, which I've taken care of here, and the other half is your slack and your strings. As you can see here, I'm stretching it out. So we'll keep doing it until it stops detuning, and then combination of this stretching and the nut being right will result in this guitar being in tune pretty much every time you go to pick it up off the peg or out of the box. So that's a real payoff for taking the time to do this. So you remember, it's both these components, 50% nut, 50% stretch, unreleased stretch in the strings. If you don't do both, you'll keep going out of tune. So if you do the stretch in the strings but you don't do the nut, it'll keep dragging and catching and causing friction, and it'll never be in tune. Close. check this last fret, that feels a bit low. Yes, that is a bit low. Very low action now, but it was a bit too low. Be very careful, I don't want to break it. See how well it stays in tune there. I've got a bit of, tiny bit of tape residue there, so I'm going to get that off the back. Thank you. Ow! Stabbed myself. Okay. Nice. So now get the plug this in. Just going to check the intonation. While I'm here, let's just check, make sure this is nice and tight. It's a little loose, but it's not loose. There's play on the inside, but it's not loose in the socket, so I won't worry about it. So to do this, I'm going to put this under the back here so I don't have to squash the socket against the floor. Don't like doing that. So we're going to go long, long, slightly long, 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 slightly long. Okay, so that means we've got to bring these this way. Now maybe I've turned it round from where it already was, but this should be the way it is, the way it's round it should be. So I'm going to turn this and bring it forward a fair bit, and then I'm going to recheck the high E, and then I'll work the rest of them off the high E. Nearly there, tiny bit flat still. So the idea is, if your fretted note at the 12th fret is sharp of the pinged harmonic note, then means your string, playing length of the string is slightly too long, and that means we shorten it by moving the saddle this way. Now I've done that to where I'm pretty sure the E, high E is intonated properly. I'm now going to drag the other ones around in quick succession following it, since I know pretty much how they should go. They tend to go in a familiar sequence. In fact, they always do. Anyone who tells you otherwise is dealing with dud strings or counterfeits. And that means this one's going to come forward of the G. So the D is always very slightly forward of the G. everything is separated by a millimetre except between the G and the D, which is about half a millimetre approximately. So here we go, a millimetre on this one and about a millimetre on this one. So I'm thinking together that should be about right. Right, it's only a bit flat, so I'll come forward again. Only one tiny move on the G by the looks of it, but that may well be, sorry, not on the G, on the D, it may well be very slightly out. Okay, that'll do us. So there we have it, tuned. Okay, I'm done, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for that. Sorry about not featuring the pickup part of things, but we are done. That's done. The only thing I might do is back at home, I might just, the blade, I might just scrape a little bit down the edge of the thing. It's just got some pencil markings on it, making it a little darker. A little grimier than it needs to look. There we are. Fab. Plenty of room everywhere. Thank you for watching. See you again soon.